The story begins in a quiet American suburban neighborhood in the late 90s. The air hums with the sound of crickets, and the night sky is a sprawling canvas of stars. Two young friends, Sarah Parker and Michael Rivers, sit on the roof of Michael's house, gazing upward as if the universe were whispering secrets only they could hear. They are 13 years old, inseparable, and brimming with dreams that feel as endless as the night sky. Sarah, with her wild curls and an artist's spark in her eyes, talks about painting the world in bold, untamed colors. Her words are a mix of laughter and conviction, her enthusiasm infectious. Beside her, Michael listens intently. He's quieter, more reserved, but his loyalty to Sarah is unshakable. His dreams are rooted in simpler things, becoming a teacher, building a life where he can help others the way he's always supported Sarah. "Promise me," Sarah says, breaking the silence. "No matter where we go or what happens, we'll always stay in touch." Michael hesitates for a moment, as if the weight of such a promise is too great to bear. But then, with a small smile, he nods. "I promise." The moment feels eternal, like it's been etched into the stars above them. Together, they seal their vow by burying a small time capsule in Michael's backyard. Inside, they place handwritten letters to their future selves, vowing to return one day and dig it up together, a symbol of their unbreakable bond. But life, as it often does, has a way of testing even the most heartfelt promises. As the story unfolds, Sarah and Michael grow up and drift apart. The bright-eyed dreamers who once swore to never lose each other are swept away by the tides of adulthood. The chapter closes with a lingering sense of loss. The audience knows that this is not just a story of friendship, but of separation, regret, and the fragile beauty of unspoken words. The night sky, once a witness to their vow, now holds the weight of a promise that may never be kept. The memories of their childhood are vivid, bursting with the warmth of endless summer days and the boundless energy of youth. Sarah and Michael were inseparable, their laughter echoing through the quiet streets of their small suburban neighborhood. Every day felt like an adventure. Together, they built treehouses in the dense patch of woods behind Sarah's backyard, their hands sticky with pine resin and their faces smeared with dirt. They spent hours riding their bikes through the neighborhood, racing each other down the empty cul-de-sacs, their shouts of triumph and playful teasing filling the air. Sarah's imagination always led the way. She dreamed of being an artist, filling the world with bold, vibrant colors. "One day, people are going to pay to see my paintings in a big gallery," she would say with a confident grin, her hands gesturing wildly as she described her visions. Michael, quieter and more grounded, was her biggest cheerleader. "I think you'll be great," he'd reply with a small smile, his sincerity making Sarah believe it was true. His own dreams were simpler, but no less meaningful. "I want to be a teacher," he once told Sarah, as they sat beneath the shade of an old oak tree. "I want to help kids like us figure out their own dreams." At age 13, under the starry sky that had witnessed their many heart-to-hearts, they made their vow. Sitting on Michael's roof, Sarah turned to him with her usual spark of mischief and determination. "Promise me, no matter what happens, we'll always stay in touch." Michael hesitated, not because he doubted her, but because the gravity of the promise felt so big. "I promise," he finally said, his voice steady. To seal their vow, they buried a time capsule in Michael's backyard. Inside, they placed handwritten letters to their future selves, along with a few trinkets that held their memories, a pressed flower from one of Sarah's art projects, and a small figurine of a teacher that Michael had carved from wood. As they covered the whole, they promised to return one day, together, to unearth the capsule and relive their bond. But time, as it often does, began to weave its threads of change. In high school, their paths started to diverge. Sarah's free-spirited nature blossomed as she became the life of the art club and joined drama performances. Her energy was magnetic, drawing new friends into her orbit. Michael, ever the quiet and focused one, buried himself in academics, tutoring younger students, and preparing for a stable future. Though their bond remained strong, cracks began to form. Sarah, with her whirlwind of activities, often found herself too busy to meet Michael for their usual bike rides. Michael, feeling the growing distance, withdrew further into his books, unsure how to bridge the gap. There were moments that reminded them of their old closeness, a shared laugh in the school hallway, a quiet conversation during lunch. But those moments became fewer and farther between. The distance wasn't intentional, but it was there, growing like a shadow between them. Despite the strain, the vow they made as children lingered in their minds. Both believed that no matter how far they drifted, their promise to each other would remain unbroken. What they didn't realize was how fragile even the strongest vows could become when tested by the passage of time. For Sarah and Michael, those carefree childhood days were slipping into the realm of memory, leaving behind the bittersweet ache of what once was. Their friendship, once as constant as the sun, was slowly becoming another casualty of growing up. As high school ended, so did the simplicity of Sarah and Michael's shared world. Life began to pull them in different directions, each step widening the distance between them. Sarah, with stars in her eyes and determination in her heart, left for New York to pursue her dream of becoming an artist. The city's vibrant energy mirrored her own, and she threw herself into her work, juggling art school, gallery internships, and endless opportunities to showcase her talent. She flourished in the chaos, but her new life left little room for anything or anyone else. Michael, on the other hand, stayed behind in their hometown. His dreams of teaching took a back seat to more immediate responsibilities. His mother's health had been declining, and he felt it was his duty to stay and care for her. Despite the weight of these challenges, he found joy in teaching at the local school, quietly shaping the minds of the next generation. For a while, they tried to maintain their bond. Letters became their lifeline, a thread connecting two vastly different worlds. Michael wrote about his students, his mother, and the familiar comfort of their small town. Sarah's letters were filled with vivid descriptions of gallery openings, late-night painting sessions, and the thrill of chasing her dreams. But as time passed, the letters became fewer. Michael's words, once eagerly awaited, began to linger unanswered. He sent Sarah heartfelt emails, telling her about a particularly inspiring student or reminiscing about their childhood adventures, but her responses grew sporadic. At first, Sarah tried to keep up, but the demands of her career consumed her. Each time she thought about replying, another deadline loomed. Another opportunity called. Michael never resented her. He understood that she was chasing something bigger, something they had always dreamed about together. But understanding didn't make the growing silence any easier to bear. There were moments when they could have reconnected. Sarah visited their hometown for the holidays one year, but hesitated to call Michael, fearing they had grown too far apart. Michael, too, had his opportunities. He once found Sarah's gallery exhibit online and considered reaching out, but he stopped himself, unsure if she even wanted to hear from him anymore. Life continued, each missed chance becoming a quiet wound in their once unbreakable bond. The promise they had made under the stars all those years ago seemed to fade into memory, eclipsed by the demands of adulthood. Neither of them had intended to drift apart, but life's unkind circumstances had a way of unraveling even the strongest ties. Unspoken, between them, was the longing to reconnect, a longing that lingered like an unfinished sentence, waiting for the right moment to be completed. But sometimes, moments slip away before they're seized, leaving behind only the ache of what might have been. It was a crisp autumn morning when Sarah's phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Distracted by her work, she almost let it go to voicemail, but something compelled her to answer. "Sarah, it's Kate, Michael's sister." The voice on the other end trembled, and before Kate could finish, Sarah's heart sank. The words that followed shattered her world. Michael had died unexpectedly in a car accident the previous evening. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Sarah froze, her mind struggling to process the news. Michael, her childhood companion, her quiet anchor, was gone. Just like that. As Kate explained the details, Sarah's vision blurred with tears. Michael had been driving home from a school event when another car lost control on the rain-slicked road. It was sudden, cruel, and unbearably final. After hanging up, Sarah sat in stunned silence, her mind flooding with memories of Michael. His shy smile, the way he listened so intently, his unwavering loyalty. Moments she had tucked away in the back of her mind now rushed forward with piercing clarity. The guilt was immediate and overwhelming. Why hadn't she kept in touch? Why had she let life, with all its distractions and demands, pull them apart? She had promised, they had promised, to always stay connected. Yet here she was, years removed from the person who had once been her closest friend. Regret wrapped itself around her like a heavy chain. She thought of the letters Michael had sent, the emails she had left unanswered. How many times had he reached out, hoping to bridge the gap, only to be met with silence? How many chances had she ignored to reconnect, assuming there would always be time? She replayed their childhood over and over in her mind. The late-night talks in their treehouse, the laughter they shared, and the dreams they had confided in each other under that starry sky. He had been there for her in ways she hadn't fully appreciated back then, and now she would never get the chance to tell him how much it had meant. Sarah's mind circled back to their vow, the promise they had made as kids. It felt like a broken thread in the fabric of her life, unraveling everything she thought she had built. As the weight of the loss settled in, Sarah realized that she wasn't just grieving Michael's death. She was grieving the relationship they could have had, the moments they had missed, and the words that had gone unspoken. The ache in her chest wasn't just for the past. It was for the promise she had failed to keep. The train's rhythmic hum was the only sound accompanying Sarah as she made her way back to the town she once called home. It had been over a decade since she left, and the memories she thought she'd forgotten now resurfaced with every passing mile. The small suburban neighborhood where she and Michael had spent their childhood was as vivid in her mind as the day she left it. Stepping off the train, Sarah was hit by a wave of nostalgia and regret. The crisp air carried the faint smell of pine, just as she remembered, and the familiar sights. Rusty street signs, the small diner on Main Street, and the old oak tree by the park transported her back to a time when life felt simpler. Her first stop was Michael's childhood home, now eerily quiet without his presence. Kate greeted her at the door, her eyes red but warm. The two hugged tightly, bound by shared grief. "I'm glad you came," Kate said softly. "Michael would have wanted you here." As they talked, Kate mentioned something Sarah had almost forgotten. The time capsule she and Michael had buried in the woods when they were 13. "He talked about it a lot," Kate said. "I think it meant more to him than he ever let on." That evening, Sarah made her way to the woods behind their old neighborhood. The path was overgrown, but her feet instinctively knew the way. She reached the spot under the old maple tree where they had buried their secrets and dreams, the place where they had made their promise to always stay connected. With trembling hands, she dug into the earth, her fingers finding the rusted tin box they had used all those years ago. She opened it carefully, as though handling a fragile piece of the past. Inside, among faded trinkets and scribbled notes, was Michael's letter to his future self. The paper was yellowed with time, the ink slightly smudged, but his handwriting was unmistakable. Sarah unfolded the letter and began to read. In it, Michael had written about his dreams of becoming a teacher, his hopes for the future, and, most of all, his gratitude for their friendship. "Dear future me, I hope by now Sarah and I are still friends. She's the best part of my childhood, and I can't imagine my life without her in it. No matter where life takes us, I hope she's happy and chasing her dreams. That's all I've ever wanted for her." Tears blurred her vision as she read his words. Even as a 13-year-old, Michael had cared so deeply, so selflessly. His letter was a time capsule not just of their friendship, but of the love and loyalty he had carried for her throughout his life. At the bottom of the letter, Michael had added a postscript. "If we've drifted apart, that's okay. Life gets busy. Just know I'm always rooting for you, Sarah. Always." Sarah clutched the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face. In that moment, she felt both the weight of her guilt and the comfort of his words. He had forgiven her long before she even realized she needed forgiveness. The next day, Sarah sat with Kate, sharing stories about Michael and the letter he had written. For the first time in years, Sarah felt a sense of bittersweet closure. She hadn't been there for Michael the way she promised, but his words reminded her that their bond had been real and unshakable, even in their distance. Standing under the old maple tree once more, Sarah whispered into the wind, I'll never forget you, Michael. Thank you for believing in me, even when I didn't. The time capsule had been a window into the past, but it also gave Sarah the strength to look forward, carrying Michael's memory and his unwavering support with her into the future. The church was filled with quiet murmurs as people gathered to say goodbye to Michael Rivers. The air was heavy with grief, yet there was an underlying warmth as friends, family, and former students shared stories of the man who had touched their lives. Sarah sat in the second row, her heart pounding as she clutched the letter she had found in the time capsule. The guilt and regret she carried felt unbearable, but there was also a sense of duty to honor Michael the way he deserved. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped up to the podium, her hands trembling slightly. Taking a deep breath, she looked out at the crowd, her eyes locking with Michael's younger sister, Kate, who gave her an encouraging nod. Michael was the kind of person who made the world a better place just by being in it, Sarah began, her voice wavering but steady. He was kind, loyal, and always believed in the people he cared about. He believed in me, even when I didn't deserve it. She shared stories of their childhood adventures, the promises they made under the stars, and the quiet strength Michael had shown throughout his life. I regret losing touch with him, she admitted, her voice cracking. But I will carry his memory with me forever, and I hope to live a life that honors the love and kindness he gave so freely. As Sarah returned to her seat, tears streamed down her face, but a weight seemed to lift. She had said what she needed to say, and in doing so, had taken the first step toward healing. After the service, Sarah stayed behind to speak with Michael's family and former students. One by one, they shared stories of how Michael had supported, inspired, and cared for them. A student recounted how Michael's encouragement had helped him pursue college, while a neighbor spoke of Michael's quiet acts of kindness. Hearing these stories, Sarah realized that Michael had lived a life filled with love and purpose, even without her presence. He hadn't held onto bitterness or resentment. Instead, he had poured his energy into uplifting others. Standing by his coffin, Sarah whispered, "You were so much more than I ever realized. I'm sorry I wasn't there, but I'll carry your light forward." Returning to her apartment in New York, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. She unpacked her art supplies for the first time in years, inspired by the memories of her friendship with Michael. She began creating a series of paintings, each one capturing a moment from their shared past. The treehouse in the woods, the night they made their vow under the stars, the time capsule beneath the maple tree. The process was cathartic, allowing her to reconcile her regret with the joy of having known him. When the series was complete, Sarah exhibited the paintings in a small gallery. She titled the collection Unspoken Words, dedicating it to Michael and the promise they couldn't keep. Visitors to the exhibit were moved by the story behind the art, and Sarah found solace in knowing that Michael's memory was touching others. On a quiet Sunday morning, Sarah returned to her hometown to visit Michael's grave. She knelt by the headstone, her fingers tracing his name etched in stone. "I'm sorry we drifted apart," she said softly, "but I'll keep the promise in my heart, always." As she stood, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it a sense of peace. Sarah walked away, determined to live a life filled with connection, gratitude, and love, just as Michael had. Life is fragile, and sometimes, the words we leave unspoken carry the deepest weight. Let Sarah's journey remind us all to cherish the connections we have, and to never wait too long to express love and gratitude. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments, like this video, and subscribe for more stories that inspire and heal. Remember, it's never too late to reach out to someone you care about. Thank you for watching.